I received my mother's text just as I adjusted my mortarboard. She wrote that they were skipping the boring ceremony for my brother's game because I could handle it myself. After 5 years of working 3 jobs and earning top honors, my family ignored me on purpose. So, I did not just accept a diploma today, I let the good daughter die, changed my name, and vanished as if I never existed. My name is Riley Phillips, and right now, I am 22 years old, standing in a line that snakes through the humid concrete bowels of a massive university arena. The air smells like industrial floor cleaner and the nervous sweat of 3,000 students about to be thrust into the real world. I am wearing a polyester gown that feels like a trash bag trapping heat against my skin, and my mortarboard keeps slipping to the left. I reach up to adjust the tassel, my fingers trembling just a little, not from excitement, but from a cocktail of caffeine and dread. I have a Bachelor of Science in Finance and Management waiting for me on that stage. I have honors cords draped around my neck. I have a future that looks perfect on paper. But right now, the only thing that matters is the phone vibrating against my palm. I look down. The screen is cracked. A spiderweb fracture over the time, which reads 1:45 in the afternoon. It is a text message from my mother. Diane. My heart does that stupid, hopeful flutter it always does. The muscle memory of a child who still thinks she can earn affection if she just performs well enough. I swipe the notification open, expecting maybe a running late, or even a generic good luck. Instead, I read the words that will effectively end my life as I know it. We decided to go to Mason's final instead. Graduation is boring anyway. You can handle it, Mom. I stare at the screen. I read it again. There are no emojis. There is no love mom. There is definitely no congratulations. Just the cold, hard facts delivered with the casual cruelty of a weather report. Mason is my 19-year-old brother, the golden boy, the baseball star, the center of the Phillips universe. Today is the district final. Of course it is. Around me, the noise is deafening. It is a chaotic symphony of joy that makes my silence feel heavy enough to crush ribs. To my left, a girl named Sarah, whom I sat next to in macroeconomics, is video calling her grandmother in Florida, screaming about how she made it. To my right, a guy is texting his dad directions to the best parking spot. Up in the stands, families are already staking out their territory. I can see them through the tunnel entrance. They are holding oversized cutouts of their kids' faces. They have balloons. They have air horns. They have flown in from across the country, taken days off work, booked expensive hotels, all to watch their children walk across a stage for exactly 10 seconds. I look at the section of seats I reserved. Section C, row 12, seats 4 through 6, empty. 3 blue plastic chairs gathering dust while my parents sit on metal bleachers at a baseball diamond 40 miles away, probably buying Mason a celebratory hot dog. The line starts to move. A marshal in a ridiculous velvet hat ushers us forward. I put one foot in front of the other, but my mind is not here. My mind is rewinding through 5 years of footage. See, most people do this degree in 4 years. I took 5. Not because I was slow, but because I was broke. I have been working 3 jobs since I was 17. I opened the campus coffee shop at 5 in the morning, steaming milk for students who complained about 8 o'clock classes while I had been awake since 4. I spent my afternoons babysitting the terrified children of professors, wiping noses and helping with Common Core math. And on weekends, I worked the graveyard shift at a grocery store, stocking shelves until 2 in the morning, my back screaming as I lifted crates of canned soup. I maintained a 3.9 grade point average. I made the dean's list every single semester. And do you know how much financial help I received from Frank and Diane Phillips? $0. Not a dime for tuition, not a cent for textbooks. When my car broke down last winter, my dad told me that fixing it was a good character-building exercise. Meanwhile, Mason gets a new truck because his old one didn't have enough room for his gear. You can handle it. That is the phrase. That is the family motto. Etched into my bones. It sounds like a compliment, doesn't it? It sounds like they trust you, but it is not a compliment. It is a dismissal. It is a permission slip they sign for themselves to neglect you. Riley is the low-maintenance plant. You do not have to water her. You do not have to give her sunlight. She will grow in the dark, through the cracks in the concrete. So why bother wasting resources on her? We are entering the arena floor now. The lights are blinding. The roar of the crowd washes over us like a physical wave. The announcer is working through the names. It is alphabetical. We are in the P section. It won't be long now. I fix a smile on my face. It is a skill I learned in customer service. You smile with your mouth, but you keep your eyes dead so nobody tries to talk to you about their day. I watch the student in front of me, a guy named Peterson, walk across. His family erupts. They go crazy. Someone brings a cowbell. His dad is jumping up and down, actually jumping, looking like he just won the lottery. Peterson looks embarrassed. But he is beaming. He is loved. He is seen. Riley Elizabeth Phillips. The name echoes over the loudspeakers. I step forward. I walk to the center of the stage. I reach out and take the diploma cover from the dean. He shakes my hand and says something generic like, "Well done." I wait for it. The cheer, the whistle, the shout of my name. There is polite applause from the general audience, the kind you give to a stranger just to be nice, but from the specific silence of Section C. Row 12. Nothing, just the empty hum of the air conditioning. I am the only person in this entire row whose walk was not punctuated by a scream of recognition. I am walking through a vacuum. I turn to the photographer at the end of the ramp. Flash. I wonder if the camera captured the exact moment my heart hardened into something resembling granite. I walk back to my seat, sit down, and fold my hands in my lap. "You can handle it," I whisper to myself. It is no longer a reassurance. It is a threat. Where are you watching from today? Tell me your city in the comments below. And hit like and subscribe if you have ever felt invisible in your own house. If you have ever been the one holding the camera while everyone else makes memories, stay with me. Because by the end of this story, you are going to have to answer a difficult question. If a family only claims you when you become valuable, are they really family at all? The ceremony ends 2 hours later. I do not throw my cap in the air. I do not linger on the quad taking pictures with friends because I know their parents will ask, "Riley, where are your folks?" And I am done lying. I am done saying, "Oh, they had an emergency," or "They are on their way." I walk straight to the parking lot. My car is a 10-year-old sedan with a dent in the passenger door and an air conditioner that only blows hot air. It is 100 degrees inside the car. I sit in the driver's seat, still wearing my gown, the heavy fabric sticking to my back. I toss the diploma cover onto the passenger seat. It slides off and lands on the dirty floor mat, right next to an old fast food wrapper. I take my phone out again. I open Instagram. I shouldn't do it. I know I shouldn't do it. It is emotional self-harm. But I do it anyway. I tap on my mother's story. The video loads. It is bright and sunny. The contrast is jarring compared to the dim interior of my car. They are at the ballpark. The camera pans to the field. There is Mason, looking like a god in his uniform, dust on his pants, winding up for a pitch. The caption reads, "Our superstar bringing the Heat proud parents baseball life." Then the camera turns. I see my dad, Frank. He is wearing a t-shirt that says Team Mason. He is holding a beer and grinning. Then I see my mom. She is glowing. She looks younger, happier. She waves at the camera and yells, "Go get 'em, baby." They look like a perfect American family, a family that has everything they need, a family that isn't missing a single thing. I was not forgotten. I was not a scheduling conflict. I was a choice. They looked at the calendar, saw 2 events, and chose the one that entertained them. They chose the investment that they thought would pay off. The golden child. I close the app. My hands are shaking again. But this time, the trembling stops abruptly. A cold calm washes over me. It is a terrifying sensation, like the temperature in my body dropping 10 degrees in a second. I lift my phone one last time. I turn the camera on myself. I do not fix my hair. I do not smile. The lighting is harsh. casting shadows under my eyes. Behind me, through the rear window, you can see the stadium where thousands of people are celebrating. I am perfectly framed in isolation. I snap the photo. I type 2 words. Did it? Alone. I post it. Almost immediately. Notifications pop up. My roommate likes it. My academic advisor hearts it. A guy I worked with at the grocery store comments. Congrats, Riley. You're a beast. I watch the view count on the story tick up. I see my aunt's name. I see my cousin's name. But from Frank, Diane, or Mason's silence, they are probably too busy celebrating the win. Or maybe they saw it and swiped past, annoyed that I am interrupting their broadcast of Mason's glory with my neediness. I toss the phone onto the passenger seat. I look at myself in the rearview mirror. The girl looking back at me has red eyes, but her jaw is set. She looks tired. She looks like she has been carrying a backpack full of rocks for 2 decades. You can handle it, I say to the reflection. My voice sounds strange in the small car. Deeper, harsher. Okay, I say. If you want me to handle it, I will handle it. I reach into my bag and pull out my laptop. I open the Notes app. I create a new note. My fingers hover over the keyboard for a second, and then I begin to type. I type with a ferocity that feels like I am carving the letters into stone. Riley Phillips died today in the parking lot. I stare at the sentence. It is dramatic. It is melodramatic. But it is also true. The girl who waited for scraps of affection is dead. The girl who sent polite reminders about her awards ceremony is dead. The girl who thought that if she just achieved one more thing, they would finally look at her, is dead. I hit enter, I skip 2 lines, and then, for the first time, I type the name. The name I have been rolling around in my head for weeks, ever since I realized nobody was coming. A name that has no history, a name that owes nobody nothing. I type it out. It looks strong. It looks sharp. It looks like a weapon. I look back at the rearview mirror one last time. I take off the mortarboard and toss it into the back seat. I unzip the gown and struggle out of it in the cramped space, revealing the simple white dress underneath. I ball up the gown, the symbol of my 5 years of struggle, and shove it down into the footwell. I start the car. The engine coughs, then roars to life, rattling the dashboard. I put it in reverse. I do not look back at the arena. I do not look back at the life I built in this town. If they want me to figure it out on my own, fine. From this moment on, they will never have the privilege of figuring out where I am. They wanted me to be independent. I'm going to be so independent that I will vanish off the face of their earth. This is not just a runaway story. This is an execution. And the person executing the plan is the only one who showed up for me today. Me. As I drive away from the stadium, the silence in my car is heavy, but it is familiar. It is the same silence that filled the hallways of our house in Redford, Ohio. For as long as I can remember, Redford is one of those small, suffocating towns where high school sports are not just extracurricular activities. They are the local religion, and if baseball is the church, then my brother Mason was the Messiah, and my parents were his most devout disciples. I was just the person who swept the pews. People often ask how it happens. How do you get to the point where you change your legal name and erase your history? They assume there must have been screaming matches, bruises, or locked basements. They want a horror story because horror is easy to understand. But my story is not a horror movie. It is a slow-motion tragedy of errors. 1,000 tiny cuts that nobody ever bothered to bandage. It was not abuse. It was something far more insidious. It was total, absolute indifference. The first cut I clearly remember happened when I turned 7 years old. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were taco nights. But since it was my birthday, Mom had promised we would order pizza from the good Italian place downtown. I had spent the entire day at school vibrating with excitement, clutching a handmade paper crown my teacher had given me. When I got home, the house was chaotic. Mason, who was 4 at the time, was sitting on the kitchen counter, his face flushed. He had a temperature. It was not a dangerous fever, maybe 99 degrees, the kind of thing a Tylenol and a nap fixes in an hour. But to Diane and Frank Phillips, It was a medical emergency of catastrophic proportions. Why? Because Mason had his first t-ball practice the next day. He feels warm, Frank, my mother was saying, her hand pressed dramatically to Mason's forehead. If he is sick, he misses the opening session. The coach needs to see his swing. I stood in the doorway, wearing my paper crown, holding my backpack. Mom, I said. She didn't even turn around. Not now, Riley. Mason is burning up. Frank, get the thermometer again. My birthday dinner that night was not the celebration I had dreamed of. We did not go out. We did not even sit at the table together. My dad ordered the pizza, but by the time he picked it up and came back, he was too busy pacing around the living room, worrying about Mason's hydration levels. The pizza box sat on the counter, unopened, growing cold. I sat alone at the kitchen island, eating a slice of lukewarm pepperoni pizza on a paper towel. There was a bakery box next to the fridge containing a cake with my name on it, but nobody had bothered to open it. Nobody lit a candle. Nobody sang. They were all in the living room, watching cartoons with Mason, making sure the heir to the Phillips dynasty was comfortable. I remember staring at the grease soaking through the paper towel and thinking, it is okay. They are just worried. I can handle this. That became the narrative. Riley is fine. Riley is independent. My mother, Diane, worked as an accountant for a small medical clinic. She was organized, efficient, and completely blind to anything that did not fit into her spreadsheet of priorities. My father, Frank, owned Phillips & Sons Construction. The name of the company always stung. Phillips & Sons, plural. As if he was expecting a legion of boys to carry on his legacy, and I was just a clerical error. Because they were so focused on Mason's athletic trajectory, I became the default adult in the house by the age of 10. While other kids were playing video games, I was learning how to separate whites from colors in the laundry, because if I didn't do it, Mason's uniform wouldn't be clean for game day. I learned to cook simple meals: spaghetti, grilled cheese, stir-fry, because Mom was always driving Mason to batting cages or physical therapy or travel team tryouts. I would be doing my homework at the kitchen table, struggling with long division, and my dad would walk in, stepping right past me to ask, "Where is Mason? Did he drink his protein shake?" "He is in the den," I would say. "Good girl," he would mutter, grabbing a beer and walking away. That was the extent of our interaction. I was part of the furniture. I was a utility, like the dishwasher or the thermostat. As long as I was functioning, nobody paid attention to me, but Mason was the golden child. He was the chosen one. Flash forward to Christmas morning when I was 14. The living room looked like a shrine to consumerism. Under the tree, the pile of gifts was massive, spilling out onto the rug, but even from a distance, the geography of the presents was clear. There was a mountain of boxes wrapped in shiny red paper for Mason, a new high-end aluminum bat that cost $400, the latest gaming console, a pair of limited edition sneakers that he had mentioned once in passing. There were gifts for Mom from Dad, and gifts for Dad from Mom. There was even a stocking stuffed with gourmet treats and a rhinestone collar for Bandit, our golden retriever. I sat there, holding my breath, waiting for my turn. "Here you go, sport," Dad said, sliding a small, flat envelope across the floor toward me. I opened it. It was a gift card to a clothing store at the mall. The amount written on the back in Sharpie was $25. I looked up, confused. "Thank you," I said, my voice small. "We didn't know what to get you," Mom said, sipping her coffee, not looking me in the eye. "Teenage girls are so difficult to buy for. We figured you would prefer to pick out something yourself. You are so self-sufficient like that." $25. They had spent $60 on the dog's collar. I looked at Mason, who was tearing into his third video game of the morning. He wasn't malicious. He didn't smirk at me. He just didn't notice. He was so used to being the son that he assumed everyone else was just happy to be in his orbit. That was the year I started working. I got a job at the local bakery, the Sweet Crumb, down on Main Street. I told my parents it was because I wanted extra spending money, but that was a lie. We weren't poor. My dad's business did well. I didn't need the money. I worked there because the owner, a stern woman named Mrs. Gable, would inspect my tray of cupcakes and say, "Good job, Riley, perfect swirl." I was starving for it. I was absolutely famished for 2 words of validation. I would scrub the floors until my knees bruised just to hear someone tell me I was a hard worker. I would stay late to organize the inventory just to feel necessary. By the time I got to high school, I had perfected the art of being the perfect, invisible daughter. I threw myself into everything that Mason wasn't. He was physical. I was intellectual. He was loud. I was quiet. I made the honor roll every single semester. I joined the debate team and went to state qualifiers. I ran for student council treasurer and won. And my parents missed every single moment of it. "We can't make the debate tournament, honey," Mom would say, barely looking up from her phone. "Mason has an away game in Dayton. It is the semifinals. But the debate is in Dayton too," I pointed out once. "You could drop by between innings." "Oh, focus, Riley," Dad snapped. "We can't split our focus. Mason needs our support. His head needs to be in the game. You know you are fine. You are smart. You don't need us holding your hand to answer a few questions on a stage." They made my success sound like a penalty, because I was capable. I was punishable by neglect. I remember one specific attempt to force them to see me. It was my junior year. I had been awarded the Outstanding Student in Economics Award. It was a big deal. There was going to be a banquet. I brought the invitation home, a nice piece of cardstock with gold lettering. I cleared a space on the refrigerator door, moving a magnetic calendar that was completely filled with Mason's practice schedule, Mason pitching, Mason conditioning, Mason scout meeting. I taped my invitation right at eye level. I even used a bright red magnet. "Please come," I said to the empty kitchen. 3 days passed. Nobody mentioned it. On the 4th day, I came home from school to find my invitation gone. Well, not gone, covered. My dad had taped a new printout over it, the revised summer league bracket for the baseball team. My invitation was still there, buried underneath, peeking out just a tiny bit at the corner, and sitting on the counter, right where they dumped their junk mail, was the RSVP card. It had a brown ring on it where someone had set down a coffee mug. They hadn't even read it. They had used my achievement as a coaster. I stood there in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator buzzing in my ears, and I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't a loud snap. It was quiet, like a dry twig breaking under deep snow. I took the RSVP card and threw it in the trash. I didn't cry. Crying was for people who thought their tears would bring comfort. I knew better. I rode my bike to the banquet that night. I wore a dress I had bought with my bakery money. I sat at a table with my economics teacher and his wife. When they called my name, I walked up, accepted the plaque, and smiled for the camera. "Where are your folks?" my teacher asked gently. "Flu." I lied. Both of them. Highly contagious. That night, I biked home in the dark, the plaque rattling in my basket. I realized then that I had been operating under a false assumption. I thought I was fighting for their attention. I thought if I just shouted loud enough, achieved high enough, shone bright enough, they would turn their heads. But you cannot wake up someone who is pretending to be asleep. They had taught me to shrink, to take up less space, to require less air, to be the low-maintenance child who drives herself to the doctor and signs her own permission slips. And slowly, a dangerous belief began to calcify in my brain. Maybe I am truly not worth the effort. Maybe I am just a supporting character in the movie of Mason's life. There was only one person who ever saw me. My grandmother, Evelyn North. She died when I was 16, but I remember sitting by her hospital bed a week before she passed. She was the only one who ever asked about my grades, or my books, or my thoughts. She grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman who was fading away. She pulled me close, her voice a raspy whisper. "You are going to do big things, Riley," she said. "You have fire in you, but you are going to have to leave this house to let it burn. It will suffocate here. You understand me. You are going to do big things, just not here." I squeezed her hand back. "I know. Grandma. She was right. But leaving is a concept that takes time to mature. Back in the present, sitting in my hot car outside the graduation arena. I pull up the Notes app on my phone again. I scroll past the new entry where I killed Riley Phillips. Below it is a list I have been keeping for years. It is titled, The Ledger. It is a list of everything they missed. 7th grade science fair. First place, missed for Mason's scrimmage. 8th grade piano recital, missed for Mason's uniform fitting. High school debate regionals, missed for a team barbecue. Prom pictures, taking photos of Mason's new cleats instead. Hospital visit when I broke my wrist. Dropped me off at the ER entrance because the game started in 20 minutes. The list goes on. It scrolls for pages. Hundreds of entries, dates, times, excuses. I look at the list, and I don't feel sad anymore. I feel like a lawyer reviewing evidence. This isn't a diary of a sad girl. This is a dossier. This is proof of negligence. People say family is unconditional. That is a lie. Family is a contract, and if one side violates the terms repeatedly for 20 years, the other side has the right to terminate the agreement. When a child is taught that being self-sufficient is their best quality, I say aloud to the dashboard, people use it as an excuse to never take care of them again. I look at the timestamp on the last entry university graduation, missed because they didn't want to be bored. I hit the return key and type one final line on the list. The day they lost their daughter, missed because they were not looking. I close the app. The ledger is complete. The case is closed. The verdict is in. It is time to execute the sentence. When I walked through the front door of my childhood home, I was still wearing my black graduation gown. It billowed around me like a dark cloud, heavy with the humidity of the afternoon and the sweat of a ceremony nobody had witnessed. I expected silence. I expected to be able to slip into my room and peel off the layers of disappointment in private. Instead, I walked into a wall of noise. The living room was exploding with sound. The television was blaring a sports recap, but it was drowned out by the voices of my parents and my brother. There was a massive sheet cake sitting on the dining table, taking up so much space that the mail and keys had been shoved onto the floor. The cake was decorated with thick, aggressive blue icing that spelled out, "Congrats." Mason signed. Mason was sitting at the head of the table, a pen in his hand, a University of Toledo baseball cap already perched on his head. He had just signed his letter of intent. He had secured a partial athletic scholarship. It was a big deal. I knew it was a big deal. But as I stood there in the foyer, clutching the diploma that certified I had mastered the complexities of finance and management, I felt like a ghost haunting a party I was not invited to. My mother, Diane, was hovering over the cake with a knife, her face flushed with a victory that was not hers. She didn't even look up when the door closed behind me. "How was the ceremony, honey?" she asked. Her tone was breezy, the kind of voice you use when you ask a cashier if they are having a nice day while you are already looking at your receipt. She did not turn around. She was too busy making sure she didn't cut through the letter M in Mason's name. I looked at the back of her head. I looked at my father, Frank, who was clapping Mason on the shoulder so hard I thought he might dislocate it. "It was exactly like you said," I replied, my voice flat. "Boring." "See," Mom said, finally slicing into the cake. "I told you we didn't miss anything. Here, grab a plate. We are celebrating." She did not ask to see the diploma. She did not ask if I walked across the stage. She did not ask if I had anyone to take a picture of me. She just handed me a paper plate with a slice of cake that was mostly blue frosting and turned back to her son. "To the future," Dad roared, raising a beer bottle. "To the future," I whispered, but I did not eat the cake. I left it on the counter, next to the pile of unpaid bills my mother always complained about, and walked down the hall to my room, or what used to be my room. When I pushed the door open, I stopped dead. The space was unrecognizable. My twin bed was still there, shoved into the corner, but the rest of the room had been colonized. There were stacks of cardboard boxes everywhere, labeled Mason, Gear, Mason, Trophies, Mason, winter clothes. They had turned my bedroom into a storage unit for him. I hadn't even moved out yet. I had been gone since morning, and in that time, they had decided my floor space was more valuable as a warehouse for his ego than as a sanctuary for my sleep. That night, I didn't confront them. I didn't scream. I curled up on my mattress, navigating a narrow canyon between a box of old cleats and a crate of protein powder. The room smelled like stale sweat and rubber. I lay there in the dark, listening to the house settle, and I realized something profound. I wasn't leaving home. Home had already left me. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the cramped darkness. I didn't go to social media. I didn't look for apartments. I typed a single question into the search bar, my fingers moving with cold precision. How to legally change your name in Ohio after 18. I expected it to be hard. I expected it to be expensive and complicated, like a divorce or buying a house. But as I read through the government websites, I felt a dark, manic smile spread across my face. It was terrifyingly easy. It required a form. It required a background check to prove I wasn't running from a felony. It required a filing fee of roughly $150. And it required one hearing. $150. That was the price of my freedom. That was the cost of erasing 22 years of being the Phillips daughter. I downloaded the PDF forms. I filled them out right there, sitting in the dark surrounded by my brother's boxes. When I got to the line that asked for the new name, I paused. I kept Riley. It was the only thing I owned. It was the name on the degrees I had paid for myself. It was the name on my paychecks. But Phillips had to go. Phillips was the name of a construction company that built things for everyone else but let its own foundation rot. Phillips was the name on the back of the jersey that my parents worshipped. I needed a direction. I needed something that pointed away from here. North, Riley North. It sounded sharp. It sounded cold. It sounded like a destination. It was a tribute to the only person who ever saw me. My grandmother, Evelyn. But it was also a compass reading. It meant up. It meant out. It meant away. I typed it in. Riley North. I looked at it on the glowing screen. It looked like a stranger, and she looked beautiful. The next morning, I told my parents I had to drive up to the university to finalize some transcript paperwork. It was a lie so boring they didn't even blink. Okay, Mom said, not looking up from her coffee. Don't forget to pick up dry cleaning for Mason on your way back. He has a press thing tomorrow. Sure, I said. I drove to the county courthouse in the next town over. I didn't want to do it in Redford where the clerk might know my dad. I filed the paperwork. I paid the fee in cash so it wouldn't show up on any bank statement they might accidentally see. The hearing was set for 30 days later. The waiting was the hardest part. I had to live in that house, answer to the name Riley Phillips, and smile while they planned Mason's going-away party, knowing that I was planning a funeral for the girl they were ignoring. When the day finally came, I wore my best suit, the one I bought at a thrift store for interviews. I stood before a probate judge who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. He adjusted his glasses and looked at my file. "State your reason for the name change," he said, his voice echoing in the empty wood-paneled room. This was the moment. I had rehearsed this. I needed a story that shut down questions. I couldn't say, because my parents don't love me. That sounds unstable. I wish to take the surname of my great-grandmother. Evelyn North, I said, my voice steady and clear. She was a pioneer in education, the first woman in our line to attend college. She was the only one who encouraged me to pursue my degree. I want to honor her legacy as I start my career. The judge looked up. His eyes softened. It was a beautiful story. It was touching. It was dignified. It was also a lie. Well, the part about Evelyn encouraging me was true, but she wasn't my great-grandmother, and I wasn't doing it for legacy. I was doing it for survival. But the court doesn't need the truth. It just needs a reason that fits on a line. Granted, the judge said. He stamped the paper. Thump. The sound was louder than a gunshot. In that split second, Riley Phillips ceased to exist as a legal entity. She was gone. The state of Ohio now recognized only Riley North. I walked out of that courthouse with a certified copy of the order in my hand. The sun was shining, and the air tasted different. It tasted like oxygen. Not the recycled air of my parents' expectations, but a name change is just paper. Now I had to do the physical work. This was the heist. I drove straight to the bank. I didn't go to the branch where my parents banked. I went to a national chain that didn't have a location in Redford. I sat down with a banker and opened a new checking and savings account under the name Riley North. Then came the transfer. I pulled out my phone. I opened the banking app for my old joint account, the one my dad was technically a custodian on, though he never checked it because there was never enough money in it to interest him. I had $4,212.50. It was money from the coffee shop, the babysitting, the graveyard shifts. Every cent was mine. I initiated the transfer, all of it, down to the zero. I watched the loading circle spin. Transfer complete. My old account balance read $0.00. I sat in the bank lobby and deleted the old banking app from my phone. It felt like cutting a wire on a bomb. If my dad checked the account now, he would see nothing, but he wouldn't check. He was too busy checking Mason's stats. Next was the digital scrub. I went to the public library, not home, never home, and spent 4 hours updating everything. I changed my name in the university system so my final official transcript would read Riley North. I updated my LinkedIn, removing my hometown and setting my location to greater metropolitan area. I created a new email address, North, contact email, com. I bought a prepaid SIM card. This was the most crucial step. I inserted it into my phone, effectively changing my number, but I didn't throw the old SIM card away. No, that would be suspicious. If I vanished and my phone went dead immediately, they might call the police. They might think I was kidnapped, and I didn't want them looking for me. I wanted them to think I was just drifting away. I kept the old number active for now. I would leave it on a burner phone I bought for $20, tucked in the glove box of my car. I would check it once a week, maybe, just to make sure the silence was still there. The new number, I gave it to exactly one person, Jenna Ruiz, my roommate, my lifeline. If anyone asks, I told her, gripping her hand across the table at our favorite coffee spot, you haven't seen me. You don't know where I am. But if I die, you are the only one who gets to know. Riley, she said, looking scared. This is intense. Are you sure? I am not Riley Phillips anymore. Jen. I said. She died in a parking lot. I am just the person cleaning up her mess. The night I left Redford for good was a Tuesday, taco night. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents were at the dinner table, arguing about whether Mason should take a summer coaching job or focus on training. They didn't ask where I was going when I walked out with 2 duffel bags. They assumed I was going to Jenna's. They assumed I would be back to do the laundry on Sunday. I loaded my car. It was everything I owned: my clothes, my laptop, my documents, and the few books that mattered to me. I backed out of the driveway. The house lights were warm and yellow. It looked like a nice place to live. It looked like a home, but it was just a building where I had held my breath for 22 years. I drove through town. I passed the Sweet Crumb Bakery. I passed my high school. And then, I passed the baseball fields. There was a banner hanging on the fence, illuminated by the streetlights. It was 10 feet long. Go Mason, our hometown hero. I slowed the car down. I looked at his name, painted in bold red letters. He was the hero. He was the protagonist. Goodbye, Mason, I said to the windshield. I hope the applause is enough to keep you warm. I hit the gas. I didn't speed. I didn't drive recklessly. I drove exactly the speed limit, heading north, toward the highway that would take me to a city where nobody knew who the Phillips family was. If you have ever dreamed of vanishing from your own family, this part of the story probably feels like a fantasy. You are thinking, I could never do that. It is too much paperwork. It is too scary. But let me tell you something. The paperwork takes 20 minutes. The fear lasts a few days. But the freedom of waking up in a room that doesn't belong to your brother's trophies, that lasts forever. But here's the disclaimer. Because I know we are on YouTube and I don't want to get sued. If you are going to disappear, make sure you do it legally. Pay your debts. Close your accounts. Don't leave a mess for the cops. The best revenge isn't a crime scene. The best revenge is a clean ledger. I was clear. I was legal. And as I crossed the county line, watching the sign for Redford disappear in my rearview mirror, I felt the first real breath of my life fill my lungs. Riley Phillips was gone. Riley North was just getting started. Riverton was not a city that welcomed you with a warm hug. It was a city of steel, gray water, and rain that seemed to fall sideways. It was a hybrid of Seattle's gloom and Boston's old money, a place where the cost of living was high and the patience for failure was non-existent. I loved it immediately. It was cold and impersonal, exactly what I needed after 22 years of suffocating heat in Redford. I found an apartment in a neighborhood that real estate agents generously called up and coming, which is code for safe enough during the day, but run to your car at night. It was a studio. Though that word implies a certain artistic flair, in reality, it was a shoebox. It was maybe 300 square feet. My bed was a futon that touched the refrigerator when I folded it out. The view from my single window was a brick wall and a dumpster that raccoons treated like a Michelin star restaurant. But the lease had only one name on it, Riley North. I paid the first month's rent and the security deposit, which drained my savings down to $300. I needed a job, and I needed one fast. I did not want to be a barista again. I did not want to stock shelves. I wanted a job where I could wear a blazer and pretend I was part of the machinery that ran the world. I landed an interview at a boutique consulting firm called Harper & Lowell Advisory. The name sounded prestigious, like a place with mahogany desks and Scotch decanters. The reality was a bit more sterile. They were located on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown. The pay was $38,000 a year, which in Riverton is barely enough to buy groceries, let alone pay rent. But I took it. I took it because of the word advisory. It sounded important. It sounded like a place where people listen to you. I was wrong about the listening part. On my first day, I showed up 15 minutes early, wearing a charcoal suit I had found on a clearance rack. I met my boss, Austin Lowell. Austin was the Lowell in Harper & Lowell, or rather, his father was. Austin was 27, had a jawline that could cut glass, and possessed the unearned confidence of a man who has never had a credit card declined in his life. "Welcome aboard," he said, barely looking up from his phone as I stood in his doorway. "You are the new support, right? Admin coordinator," I corrected gently. "Riley North." "Right, Riley. Cool. Listen, grab me a coffee, oat milk latte, 2 pumps of vanilla, and print the Q3 deck for the 10 o'clock. Thanks. Intern." I froze. The badge clipped to my blazer clearly said Riley North, admin coordinator. I was a full-time employee with benefits, meager as they were, but to Austin Lowell, anyone under the age of 30 who wasn't generating revenue was an intern. "Sure, Austin," I said. That set the tone for the next 6 months. The office was populated by a dozen other junior associates, all of whom seemed to be clones of each other. They had names like Spencer and Mackenzie. They wore watches that cost more than my car. In the break room, they talked about their weekends in Vail or the Hamptons, or how their parents were helping them with the down payment on a condo in the historic district. I would stand there, stirring hot water into the instant coffee crystals I brought from home in a Tupperware container, because I couldn't afford the $5 lattes they ordered, and I would just listen. Invisibility, it turns out, is a transferable skill. I spent my childhood blending into the wallpaper so my parents wouldn't notice I was there and ask me to do chores for Mason. Now, I use that same superpower to become the most effective ghost in the corporate world. My job description was mostly administrative. I managed calendars. I booked flights. I ordered catering for lunch meetings. I cleared conference tables after the real work was done. It was menial, repetitive work, but I performed it with a terrifying level of precision. I color-coded Austin's calendar. I memorized the lunch orders of every partner. I made sure the printer never ran out of toner. I did this not because I loved the company, but because I was terrified of being fired. I had no safety net. If I lost this paycheck, I was homeless. But while I was wiping down whiteboards and collating packets, I was listening. I would stand in the copy room, the rhythmic swish thump of the Xerox machine covering the sound of my breathing, and I would listen to the associates discuss strategy. I learned the vocabulary: EBITDA, churn rate, blue ocean strategy, pain points. I heard how they spun bad news to clients. I heard how they padded their billable hours. Just put it down as market research, I heard Spencer say once. I spent 2 hours on Reddit, but technically, that is research. I learned that Austin Lowell was not just rude. He was incompetent. He was a soft copy of my father, Frank Phillips. He had the same bluster, the same expectation that the world would bend to his whims, and the same habit of blaming everyone else when things went wrong. "Intern," he would shout from his office, "where's the briefing for the Vantage meeting?" I would walk in, calm and collected. "I sent it to your inbox yesterday at 4 o'clock, and I placed a printed copy on your desk this morning, under your iPad." He would lift the iPad, find the document, and instead of apologizing, he would huff. "Well, don't hide it next time. You have to manage me better. Riley, that is your job." It was exactly what my mother used to say. You have to help Mason remember his cleats. If he forgets, it is because you didn't remind him. I saw the pattern. Austin was the new Mason, the office was the new Redford, and I was being shoved back into the role of the silent fixer. But this time, I wasn't doing it for love or duty. I was doing it for data. The turning point came 3 months in. We were approaching a massive deadline for a client called Vantage Core Labs. It was a pitch that could make or break the quarter. Austin was in charge of the financial projections. For 2 weeks, he had been blowing off the work to go to networking lunches that mostly involved martinis. At 5 in the afternoon, the day before the presentation, he dumped a pile of raw data on my desk. "I need this formatted into a slide deck," he said, loosening his tie. "I am heading to a dinner thing. Just make it look pretty. The numbers are all there." He left. I looked at the files. The numbers were not all there. It was a disaster. The spreadsheets were a mess of broken formulas and circular references. He had projected a growth rate that was mathematically impossible unless they started selling illegal drugs. If he presented this, the client would laugh him out of the room, and since I was the one formatting it, he would blame me for the error. I sat there in the darkening office. The cleaning crew came and went. The vacuum cleaners hummed around my feet. I had 2 choices. I could format the garbage he gave me and watch him crash and burn, or I could fix it. I looked at my bank account balance on my phone. I couldn't afford to be fired if he decided to scapegoat me. I opened YouTube. I typed, "How to build a financial model in Excel for beginners." I stayed until 2 in the morning. I drank 4 cups of terrible office coffee. I learned about pivot tables. I learned how to calculate compound annual growth rates. I cross-referenced his data with the client's public annual reports. I found errors in his logic that a first-year business student would be embarrassed by. I didn't just format the slides. I rebuilt the entire logic of the presentation. I used a red font to mark the places where his numbers were wrong, and right next to them, I put the correct numbers in black. By the time I left the office, my eyes felt like they were filled with sand. I left the printed deck on his desk with a sticky note. I adjusted the formatting and reconciled some data discrepancies. The next morning, the team gathered in the conference room. I was there to pour water and take notes. Austin walked in, looking hungover. He picked up the deck. He flipped through it. I saw his eyes widen when he saw the changes. He looked at the red ink. He looked at the black ink. He looked at me. I kept my face blank. I poured water into a glass pitcher. He didn't say thank you. He didn't acknowledge the 5 hours of work I had done to save his career. He just walked into the pitch meeting. I listened from the hallway, pretending to organize a supply closet. "As you can see from this projection," Austin's voice boomed, sounding confident, "we have identified a conservative but steady growth path." He was reading my numbers. He was using my logic. He was repeating the bullet points I had written at 1 in the morning. When the door opened an hour later, the client, a stern woman named Nora Hayes, was smiling. "That was impressive, Austin," she said. The analysis on the supply chain risk was particularly sharp. Very few consultants catch that. "Thank you, Nora," Austin said, beaming. "I wanted to make sure we were thorough." He took the credit. He took 100% of the credit. My stomach twisted. It was the science fair all over again. It was my parents praising Mason for a home run while I stood there holding his bat. It burned. It burned hot and fierce in my chest. But then, I noticed something else. Austin looked at me. Just for a second. There was fear in his eyes. He knew. He knew that he didn't understand the numbers he had just presented. He knew that the intern understood his job better than he did. He needed me. That realization was like a drug. In my family, I was ignored because I was useless to their goals. Here, I was ignored publicly. But privately, I was becoming essential. I went back to my desk. I opened a specific folder on my computer. It was hidden deep in the drive, labeled Personal, Receipts. I opened a new document. I titled it Project Vantage, Corrections and Overtime. I documented everything. I wrote down the time I started. I wrote down the specific errors in Austin's original file. I wrote down the YouTube tutorials I watched to fix them. I wrote down the exact words the client used to praise the work. Austin Lowell. Claimed credit for risk analysis model. Created by Riley North. Date October 12th. I saved the file. This was my new ledger. If the world was going to treat me like a utility, I was going to be a utility that kept a meter reading. I continued this dynamic for months. I became the ghostwriter of Austin's success. I caught spelling errors in his emails. I researched the hobbies of his clients so he could make small talk. I restructured his confusing memos into clear, concise bullet points. I even started adding small insights into the slide deck's little strategic suggestions that I formatted as notes for review. He never reviewed them. He just incorporated them into his speech. He still called me intern half the time. He still snapped his fingers when he wanted coffee. He still acted like he was doing me a favor by letting me breathe the same air-conditioned air as him. "Riley, did you book the flight to Chicago?" he asked one afternoon, dropping his gym bag on my desk. "Yes, Austin, seat 4A, and I ordered the gluten-free meal because the client is gluten intolerant, and you should probably skip the bread roll if you are eating with him," I said, not looking up from my screen. He paused. "Oh, good catch." He walked away. I watched him go. He was wearing a $3,000 suit, but he was empty inside. I was wearing a $20 blouse, but I was filling up with something dangerous. I was filling up with leverage. I knew where the bodies were buried because I was the one digging the graves and planting flowers on top of them. If you have ever been the person who does 90% of the work for 0% of the credit, you know the feeling. It starts as resentment. It tastes like bile in the back of your throat, but if you let it sit, if you let it ferment, it turns into something else. It turns into strategy. I wasn't just a secretary anymore. I was a spy in the house of mediocrity, and I was gathering enough ammunition to blow the roof off. "Riley," a voice said. I looked up. It was Nora Hayes, the client from the Vantage meeting. She was standing at my desk. She wasn't looking at Austin's closed door. She was looking at me. "I noticed something in the last report," she said, her voice low. "The syntax, the way the data was visualized. It changed halfway through the quarter. It became sharper." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Oh," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Austin is a big-picture guy," Nora said, leaning in slightly. "He doesn't care about the details, but that report was obsessed with details. Who actually wrote it?" I looked at her. I looked at the nameplate on my desk, Riley North. "Austin is the lead consultant," I said, reciting the company line. "I just provide administrative support," Nora smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a shark smile, a smile that recognized another predator in the water. "Right," she said. "Administrative support. Well, tell Austin the support is better than the lead. And Riley—" "Yes. Keep the red pen handy. I have a feeling you are going to need it." She walked away. I sat there, my hands trembling slightly on the keyboard. I wasn't invisible. Someone had seen the ghost. And for the first time in my life, being seen didn't feel dangerous. It felt like an opportunity. I opened my ledger. I typed a new entry. Nora Hayes suspects. The game is changing. I took a sip of my cold instant coffee. It tasted like mud. But as I looked around the office at the rich kids planning their ski trips, I realized I didn't want to be them. I wanted to own them, and I was starting to figure out exactly how to do it. The atmosphere at Harper & Lowell Advisory in the weeks leading up to the Vantage Core Labs pitch was not just tense, it was toxic. This was the kind of deal that decided whether the partners bought new summer homes or laid off half the support staff. Vantage Core was a tech giant looking to expand into volatile foreign markets, and they needed a consultancy firm to map out the regulatory landmines. Austin Lowell had promised them the moon. Specifically, he had promised them a proprietary risk assessment framework that could predict market instability with 95% accuracy. The problem was that no such framework existed. I knew this because I was the one organizing his files. I had seen the drafts. I had seen the panicked emails he sent to his friends from business school asking if they had any templates he could borrow. What Austin had was a slide deck filled with buzzwords and a data set that was 2 years old. I stood at the copy machine, pretending to collate binders, while I watched him pace around his glass office. He was sweating through his dress shirt. He looked exactly like my father. Frank did right before he had to tell a client that a project was going to be $50,000 over budget because he had miscalculated the cost of lumber. It was the look of a man who believed his own charm could bend mathematics. I went back to my desk and pulled up the brief. I had read it 3 times. The client needed real-time analysis. Austin was using inflation data from 2021. If he put that up on a screen in front of the Vantage executives, they would eat him alive. I should have let him burn. It would have been poetic justice. But if Harper & Lowell lost this account, the rumors were that the administrative staff would be the first to go. I had $300 in my savings account and a lease on a studio apartment that smelled like damp plaster. I could not afford to be righteous. I had to be necessary. The crash happened at 7 in the evening, the night before the presentation. The office was buzzing with that frantic energy of impending doom. Austin was trying to merge 3 different Excel sheets when his screen froze. He clicked the mouse once, twice, then he started slamming it against the desk. "No, no, no," he screamed. The blue wheel of death spun on his monitor. Then, black. "It is gone," he yelled. Standing up so fast, his chair hit the glass wall behind him. "The file is corrupted here." "Is it? Get me a..." The IT guy had gone home at 5. The office went silent. Everyone looked down at their desks, terrified of making eye contact with the drowning captain. Austin stormed out of his office, his eyes wild. He scanned the room and landed on me. "Riley, you made a backup, right? Tell me you made a backup on the shared drive." I sat perfectly still. I looked at him. I looked at the panic in his eyes. It was delicious. It was the same panic I used to see in Mason's eyes when he realized he hadn't done his history project due the next morning. "I have a backup on a flash drive," I said calmly. "Give it to me," he snapped, holding out a shaking hand. "Now," I hesitated. I let the silence stretch for exactly 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, I wasn't an admin coordinator. I was the person holding the oxygen tank. I reached into my drawer, but I didn't hand him his file. I had spent the last 3 nights building something else. I had scraped current data from World Bank public reports. I had used the advanced Excel formulas I learned on YouTube to build a dynamic dashboard that actually adjusted risk percentages based on currency fluctuation. It was clean. It was functional. It was the proprietary framework he had lied about, brought to life by the person who fetched his coffee. I handed him the drive. "This version has the formatting updates," I said, and I plugged in the Q3 data so it wouldn't look dated. He didn't even say thank you. He snatched the drive, ran back to his office, and slammed the door. I watched through the glass as he plugged it in. I saw the blue light of the monitor illuminate his face. I saw his jaw drop. He clicked through the tabs. He wasn't looking at a broken spreadsheet anymore. He was looking at a miracle. He never came out to ask me how I did it. He just started practicing his speech. The next morning, the conference room smelled of expensive cologne and fear. The Vantage Core team sat on one side of the long mahogany table. They looked like sharks in human skin. Their CEO was a woman named Elena, who had a reputation for firing consultants in the middle of sentences. I was sitting in the back corner, armed with a notepad and a pitcher of water. Austin stood at the front. He looked confident again. He had his game face on. "At Harper & Lowell, we don't just guess," Austin said, his voice smooth. "We calculate." He clicked the remote. My dashboard appeared on the massive screen. It was beautiful. The heat map of geopolitical risk pulsed with red and orange. The currency graphs were sharp and precise. "This is our proprietary dynamic risk shield," Austin lied, gesturing to the work I had finished at 2 a.m. "It updates in real time." The room was quiet. Elena leaned forward. She adjusted her glasses. "Interesting," she said. "Run the simulation for a 10% tariff hike in the Southeast Asian sector." Austin froze. He knew how to talk, but he didn't know how the tool worked. He looked at the screen. He looked at the mouse. He didn't know which tab to click. He didn't know the formula. "Well," Austin stammered, "the system. It takes a moment to calibrate for that specific variable." He was drowning. He was 5 seconds away from losing the contract. I didn't stand up. I didn't clear my throat. I ripped a page out of my stenopad. I uncapped my pen. I wrote 2 sentences in large, block letters. Click, tab 4, macro scenarios, input 10 in cell D5. The impact is a 4% margin compression. I stood up quietly, as if I were just checking the water levels. I walked to the front of the room, placed the paper face up on the table right next to his hand, and poured water into his empty glass. Austin looked down. He saw the note. He blinked. He reached for the mouse. He clicked tab 4. He typed 10 into cell D5. The graph on the screen shifted instantly. The profit line dipped, but stabilized. "As you can see," Austin said, his voice returning to full volume, "a 10% hike results in a manageable 4% margin compression. We can absorb that if we hedge the currency early." Elena looked at the screen. She looked at Austin. Then, for a split second, her eyes flicked to me as I walked back to my corner. "Impressive recovery," she said. An hour later, they signed a 6-month trial contract worth $200,000. The room erupted in handshakes. Everyone was clapping Austin on the back. "Great job, man. Incredible tool, Austin. You really saved us." I gathered the empty water glasses. I wiped the condensation rings off the mahogany. I was invisible again, or so I thought. I took the elevator down to the lobby to pick up lunch for the team their victory feast, which I was not invited to. The doors were closing when a hand stopped them. It was Nora Hayes. She was a senior partner, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She stepped in. The doors slid shut. We were alone. "Going down?" she asked. "Just getting lunch for the team," I said. She watched the numbers on the display count down. 12, 11, 10. "That was a nice bit of sleight of hand upstairs," she said. Her voice was casual, but the words were sharp. My grip tightened on the handle of my bag. "I am not sure what you mean, Ms. Hayes." "Austin Lowell couldn't build a dynamic dashboard if his life depended on it," she said. "He barely knows how to use the sum function, and when Elena asked that question, he looked like he was about to faint until you walked over there." She turned to face me. "Do you often save him like that?" I looked at her. I had spent my whole life protecting the egos of fragile men because it was the only way to keep the peace. "I just do my job," I said. "My job is to support the team." "Your job description says you answer phones and book flights," Nora said. "That dashboard was analyst-level work. Actually, it was senior analyst work." The elevator dinged at the lobby. "Send me the Excel file," she said. "The raw one, not the PDF Austin sent out. I want to see the formulas. She walked out before I could answer. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the blinking cursor of my email. Sending her the file was dangerous. It proved I was doing work I wasn't authorized to do. It proved Austin was a fraud. But it also proved I existed. I attached the file. I hit send. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Nora. We need to talk about whose job you are actually doing. My office. Tomorrow. 7 in the morning. I didn't sleep that night. I showed up at 6:45. Nora was already there, drinking an espresso. My dashboard was projected on her wall. She had the formula bar open. Where did you learn to nest if statements like this? She asked without saying hello. This is messy, but it is brilliant. It is intuitive. YouTube, I said. And I read a lot of white papers. She turned her chair around. You have an instinct for risk, Riley. You see the break in the chain before the pressure is even applied. That is not something I can teach. You either have it, or you are Austin Lowell. She slid a piece of paper across her desk. It wasn't a termination notice. Junior risk analyst, she said. It is a trial position, a significant raise. You report directly to me. No more fetching coffee. No more hiding behind incompetent men. I looked at the paper. The salary was $65,000. It was enough to move out of my shoebox. It was enough to breathe. But, Nora said, there is a condition. You have to own your work. Your name goes on the reports. Your name goes on the client emails. I don't pay ghosts. My stomach dropped. Visibility. If my name started appearing on industry reports, if I started making noise, there was a chance, a small, terrifying chance that it could ripple back to Ohio. My father read trade magazines sometimes. Is there a problem? Nora asked, seeing my hesitation. I value my privacy, I said carefully. I prefer to stay in the background. The background is where people get forgotten, Nora said. You are too good to be forgotten. Riley, take the job, put your name on the door, or go back to answering phones for a man who makes 3 times your salary for half your IQ. I thought about the graduation ceremony. I thought about the empty seat. I thought about the text message. You can handle it. I picked up the pen. I will take it, I said. But I want to be listed as Riley North. Just R, North on the internal docs if possible. Riley North, Nora said, testing the sound of it. Strong name. It sounds like a direction. It is, I said. I signed the contract. My hand didn't shake. Nora took the paper back. She looked at me with a strange expression. It was almost maternal, but sharper. Your family must be very proud of you, she said. 22 years old and cracking the associate track at a firm like this. They must be bragging about you to everyone back home. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my cheap skirt. I looked Nora Hayes in the eye, and for the first time, I told the truth about the lie. They don't know I am here, I said. Nora raised an eyebrow. They don't know you got promoted. They don't know where I am, I said. They don't know who I am. And frankly, Ms. Hayes, that is my biggest competitive advantage. I walked out of her office. I wasn't an admin anymore. I was an analyst. And for the first time since I drove out of Redford, I wasn't running away from something. I was running toward something. I went back to my desk. Austin was there, drinking a latte. Hey, intern, he said. Grab me a refill. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had worn in weeks. No, I said. I don't think I will. I started packing my box. It was time to move to the other side of the floor. 3 years is a lifetime in the corporate world. In 3 years, empires can rise, stocks can crash, and a girl who used to fetch coffee can become the person terrifying the boardroom. Under Nora Hayes' protection, I stopped being a ghost and started being a weapon. I became the person Harper and Lowell sent in when a client was bleeding money and didn't know where the wound was. They called me an associate, but behind my back, the junior staff called me the Grim Reaper of spreadsheets. I liked that title. It implied that I saw things people wanted to keep dead and buried. My biggest test came with the Brightline Market Group. They were a massive retail conglomerate, the kind that owned grocery stores in 40 states. They were hemorrhaging cash $10 million a quarter, and their CEO was blaming millennial spending habits. I spent 2 weeks living in their data room. I didn't look at their marketing. I looked at their inventory logs. I found the rot. It wasn't millennials. It was a vendor fraud scheme in their logistics chain that had been siphoning 4% of their gross revenue for 5 years. When I presented the findings to their board, the room was silent. I put a single slide on the screen showing the red line of theft tracing back to a shell company owned by the brother-in-law of their chief operating officer. "You don't have a revenue problem," I told them, my voice steady. "You have a nepotism problem." The COO was fired the next morning. Brightline saved $12 million in the first quarter after the restructure. That afternoon, Nora called me into her office. She didn't congratulate me. She poured 2 glasses of sparkling water and sat on the edge of her desk. "You know, Riley," she said, looking at the skyline, "Harper & Lowell is billing you out at $500 an hour. We are paying you a salary that breaks down to about $40 an hour. The math is starting to offend me." I sat down. "It is the industry standard, Nora." "Screw the standard," she said. "Austin Lowell is walking around taking credit for the Vantage account still. Even though you have been running it solo for 18 months, he needs you. The firm needs you. But here's the question, do you need us?" I looked at her. The thought had been scratching at the back of my mind for months, like a loose thread on a sweater. "I am 25, I said. "I don't have capital. I don't have a name." "You have a name," Nora corrected. "Riley North. The Brightline board knows it. The Vantage team knows it. You have built a brand on being the person who sees the iceberg before it hits the ship. Harper & Lowell is just the middleman taking a cut." She leaned forward. "Have you ever thought about going out on your own?" The seed was planted, and because I was Riley North, I didn't just water the seed. I built a hydroponic greenhouse around it. For the next 6 months, I went back to my roots. I became the spy again. I worked my full 60-hour week at Harper & Lowell, delivering impeccable results. But in the margins between the hours of 10 at night and 2 in the morning, I was building Northlight strategies. I didn't do it recklessly. I treated my own exit like a client project. I hired a contract lawyer to review my non-compete agreement. I found a loophole the non-compete prevented me from soliciting clients active within the last 30 days. But it said nothing about clients who approached me independently after I resigned. I incorporated the business. I built the website myself, learning coding on weekends. I designed the logo a simple, stark compass needle pointing true north. I saved every penny. I was making decent money now, but I still lived in a cheap apartment. I ate peanut butter sandwiches. I didn't buy new clothes. Every dollar went into the Freedom Fund. By the time I was ready to launch, I had $50,000 in cash. It wasn't a fortune, but for a girl who started with a negative balance and a stolen graduation day, it felt like an empire. The day I resigned was anticlimactic, which made it perfect. I walked into Austin's office. He was hitting golf balls into a putting cup on the carpet. "Hey, Riley," he said. "Can you push the 2 o'clock? I want to leave early for the weekend." "I can't." "Austin," I said. "I am giving my 2 weeks' notice." He missed the putt. He looked up, genuinely confused. "What? Why did you get a better offer? We can match it. Is it Deloitte?" "I know guys at Deloitte. I can make a call." "It is not Deloitte," I said. "I am moving on to pursue personal projects. But you are the best assistant I have ever had," he said. I felt a muscle in my jaw twitch. 3 years, millions of dollars saved, and to him, I was still just a really good assistant. "I am a senior analyst, Austin," I said softly. "Good luck with the pudding." Nora was waiting for me in the hall. She didn't hug me, she just smirked. "He is going to panic in about 3 days when he realizes he doesn't know the password to the client portal," she whispered. "He will figure it out," I said. "Or he won't. Not my problem." Northlight Strategies opened its doors on a Monday morning in November. The doors were the entrance to a tiny 300-square-foot office I rented in a strip mall. It was sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a vape shop. The view from my single window was the back alley where the delivery trucks idled. Inside, I had 2 desks I bought from a liquidator, a coffee machine, and a whiteboard. On the wall, I taped a piece of paper. It wasn't a mission statement, it was a reminder. Invisible girls build visible empires. I sat down at the desk, opened my laptop, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. The phone rang on Tuesday. It was Elena from Vantage Core Labs. "I heard you left the circus," she said. "I did," I replied. "I decided I preferred a smaller tent." "Well," Elena said, "I don't pay for the tent. I pay for the acrobat. Harper and Lowell tried to assign me some kid named Spencer. He tried to explain my own currency risk to me using a textbook definition. Send me your contract. Riley, we are moving the account." 2 days later, the CFO of Brightline called. "We heard Vantage moved. We want in. Austin called us. But honestly, talking to him is like talking to a dial-up modem. We want the person who found the fraud." By the end of the first month, Northlight Strategies was profitable. By the end of the first year, we had generated $3 million in revenue. It wasn't easy money. I worked 18-hour days. I slept on the floor of the office more nights than I slept in my bed. I learned how to do payroll, how to pay corporate taxes, how to negotiate commercial leases. I aged 5 years and 12 months, but every time I wrote a check to myself, signed Riley North, I felt a jolt of electricity. Nobody gave this to me. Nobody signed a permission slip. Nobody bought me the equipment. I needed help. I couldn't handle the volume alone. I posted job listings, but I didn't look at Ivy League degrees. I looked for the hungry ones. I hired a guy named Marcus. He was 23, brilliant with algorithms, but he had dropped out of college because he had to work 2 jobs to support his sick mother. He showed up to the interview in a suit that was 2 sizes too big, clearly borrowed. "Why should I hire you?" I asked him. "Because I don't sleep," he said. "And because I know what it costs to be poor. Rich kids make mistakes because they have a safety net. I don't make mistakes because I can't afford them." I hired him on the spot. Then I hired Sarah, a girl who had put herself through night school while working at a call center. She had a chip on her shoulder the size of a boulder. I loved it. We were a team of strays. We were the kids who were forgotten at pickup, the ones who ate lunch alone, the ones who learned to survive in the cracks, and we were absolutely dismantling the competition. As my profile rose, the invitations started coming: industry panels, women in business breakfasts, crisis management summits. At first, I declined them all. Visibility was dangerous. But Nora advised me otherwise. If you don't tell your story, someone else will tell it for you, and they will get it wrong. So, I accepted a keynote spot at the National Risk Management Conference in Chicago. The room was packed with 500 executives. I stood on the stage, wearing a suit that cost more than my parents' car. I spoke for 45 minutes about the architecture of disaster. I talked about how small cracks, ignored over time, bring down massive structures. I talked about how negligence is just as destructive as malice. During the QA, the moderator, a polished woman with a bright smile, leaned forward. "Riley, your rise has been meteoric. You are 26, running a multi-million-dollar firm. Tell us, what does your family think of all this? They must have been incredibly supportive to help you launch so young." The room went quiet. It was the standard question. People love the supportive family narrative. It makes them feel warm. It validates the American dream. I gripped the podium. I could lie. I could say, "Oh yes, they are thrilled." But I looked at Marcus and Sarah sitting in the front row. They knew the truth. "I think we overvalue the idea of support," I said into the microphone. "We tell people that they need a village to succeed. But sometimes, the village is the thing holding you back. Sometimes, you have to burn the village down to build a skyscraper." There was a nervous titter in the audience. "My success isn't a product of support," I continued. "It is a product of necessity. I didn't have a safety net. I didn't have investors. I had a fear of disappearing. And fear, if you harness it, is a much better fuel than a trust fund." I didn't mention Redford. I didn't mention Mason. but the answer was sharp enough to cut through the fluff. The applause that followed was different. It wasn't polite. It was stunned. I had said the quiet part out loud. I had admitted that the self-made story is often a story of abandonment, not just ambition. You know what? I thought as I walked off stage. People love a survivor until the survivor points out who tried to kill them. I went back to the green room. I checked my phone. There were dozens of emails from potential clients who had seen the live stream. But one subject line stood out. It was from an editor at Visionary Weekly. Subject interview request. The special issue. I opened it. Dear Ms. North, we are compiling our annual 40 under 40 list, but we want to do a special cover story this year. The theme is The Minds That Save Business from Itself. We have been following Northlight's trajectory. We want to profile you. We want the full story where you came from, how you built this, and the philosophy behind your invisible strategy. I stared at the screen. Visionary Weekly was not a trade blog. It was the Bible of the business world. It was on every newsstand, every airport lounge, every coffee table in corporate America, including the waiting room of Dr. Miller's clinic in Redford, Ohio, where my mother worked, including the desk of the loan officers at the bank where my father tried to get construction financing. If I did this, there was no going back. The shadow would be gone. I would be standing in the spotlight, and the light would shine all the way back to Ohio. I thought about the parking lot. I thought about the text message. You can handle it. I hit reply. I am interested. Let's talk. I put the phone down. The invisible girl was about to become the most visible woman in the room, and I was ready for them to see me. All of them. The issue of Visionary Weekly hit my desk with a heavy, glossy thud. It was the kind of sound that usually signals a shift in the atmosphere, like a gavel hitting a judge's bench. On the cover, I was wearing a white structural blazer that cost more than my father's truck. My arms were crossed, my chin was tilted up, and the headline was printed in bold, crimson letters right across my chest. The girl who was invisible now makes corporations see the risks they ignore. I stared at it. It felt surreal. For 22 years, I had been fighting to get into a family photo, to get a single frame on a mantelpiece in Redford. Now, I was in every airport lounge, every C-suite lobby, and on every coffee table in the Fortune 500. The article inside was a masterpiece of strategic ambiguity. I had worked with the journalist, a sharp woman named Elena, to craft a backstory that was true but untraceable. We described my upbringing as blue-collar Midwest. We mentioned a family that valued hard work, which was code for a family that made me work 3 jobs. We didn't mention Ohio. We certainly didn't mention baseball, but the quote that went viral, the one that people started putting on Instagram captions and LinkedIn posts, was in the 3rd paragraph. I became an expert in risk because I grew up in an environment where safety was not guaranteed. The article quoted me. When you are invisible, you learn to watch the room. You see the cracks in the foundation while everyone else is looking at the chandelier. That quote started a fire. Within 48 hours, my inbox was flooded. But it wasn't just job offers anymore. It was fan mail. It was people asking me to speak at colleges. And then came the invitation from The Market Watcher, a financial podcast with 2 million subscribers. My publicist, yes, I had a publicist now told me to do it. It is just audio, Riley, she said. Low risk, high reward, you control the narrative. So I sat in a soundproof booth in downtown Riverton, headphones over my ears, talking to a host who usually interviewed hedge fund managers about interest rates, but he didn't want to talk about interest rates. He wanted to know about the Invisible Girl brand. You talk a lot about self-reliance, the host said. Is that something your parents instilled in you? I paused. I could see the recording levels bouncing on the monitor. My parents taught me that expectation is the root of disappointment, I said. They taught me that if I wanted something done, from paying for a textbook to finding a ride to the emergency room, I had to do it myself. At the time, I thought it was cruelty. Now, I realize it was training. That is a harsh way to grow up, the host noted. It is, I agreed. But it clarifies things. If they think you can handle it, then you handle it. You handle it so well that by the time they realize you are gone, you have built a life where they have no right to handle you anymore. You build a fortress so high they can't even reach the doorbell. When the episode dropped, that clip was shared 50,000 times in 3 days. I sat in my office late one night, scrolling through the comments. I expected trolls. I expected people to call me cold or arrogant. Instead, I found a digital congregation of the forgotten. This is my life. My parents missed my wedding for my sister's cat surgery. I paid for my own braces while my brother got a new car. I feel this. I see you. Riley, I see you. I read that comment over and over. I see you. It was the one thing I had wanted Diane Phillips to say to me my entire life. And now, thousands of strangers were saying it. I felt a strange mixture of validation and grief. I was building a community on the ruins of my childhood. I felt like I owed these people a victory. I couldn't just be successful for myself anymore. I had to be successful for every kid who was currently eating dinner alone while their parents praised a sibling in the other room. Then came the call from the BNF network. They wanted me for their primetime show, Market Movers. This wasn't a podcast. This was national television. High-definition cameras. Millions of viewers. My team was nervous. If you go on TV, Marcus, my head analyst, warned me. You lose the anonymity. You are just a face in a magazine right now. But TV is intimate. People feel like they know you. I know, I said. But we just landed the Brightline contract. We need to cement the reputation. I had one condition for the network. I told the producer, explicitly, in writing, no questions about my birth name, no questions about my specific hometown. If you ask, I walk. They agreed. They didn't care about where I was from. They cared about the nickname the internet had given me, the North Brain. The night of the broadcast, I sat in the makeup chair while a woman applied powder to my forehead. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look like Riley Phillips anymore. My hair was cut into a sharp, asymmetrical bob. My suit was a deep navy that looked like armor. I looked dangerous. The interview went perfectly. I was calm. I was funny. When the host tried to pivot to my personal life, asking if I had a partner or a family to share my success with, I smiled a smile that didn't reach my eyes. My success is shared with my team, I said, and with the ledger of receipts I keep in my head. The audience laughed, thinking I was joking. I wasn't joking. The clip of that interview was everywhere the next morning. It was on Twitter. It was on TikTok. And inevitably, it ended up on Facebook. This is the part where the story tightens. This is the part where the past stops being a shadow and starts becoming a hand grabbing at your ankle. I didn't know it at the moment, but a woman named Sarah, who I had sat next to in biology class during sophomore year of high school, saw the clip. Sarah was one of those people who never left Redford. She was friends with my mother on Facebook. She shared the video to her timeline, and she tagged Diane Phillips. Diane, oh my God, I saw this girl on TV last night. Her name is Riley North, but look at her face. Doesn't she look exactly like your Riley? Did she change her name in a living room in Redford, Ohio? My mother was sitting on the beige sofa that still smelled like the dog. The television was on, probably playing a replay of a classic baseball game. My phone was not there, but I can reconstruct the scene perfectly because I know them. I know the layout of the room. I know the silence that hangs there when Mason isn't home. Diane saw the notification. She clicked the link. She watched the video on her phone screen. She saw a woman who looked like her daughter, but sharper, richer, a woman who spoke with authority. Not the quiet, apologetic mumble of the girl who used to ask if it was okay to do laundry. She watched it twice. She watched me talk about building a fortress. Frank, she said. Her voice was probably trembling. Frank, come look at this. My father walked in from the kitchen, holding a beer. What? This girl on the internet, Diane said. Sarah thinks it is Riley. Frank squinted at the phone. He watched for 10 seconds. He saw me explaining a complex hedging strategy for international supply chains. He saw the chyron at the bottom of the screen, Riley North, CEO of Northlight Strategies, valuation estimated at 40 million. He laughed. He actually laughed. That is not Riley, he said, turning away. Riley is working at some office in Columbus or Cleveland. She told us she was busy. Besides, look at that woman. That woman runs a company. Our Riley couldn't even figure out how to park the sedan without scratching it. But the eyes, Frank, Diane whispered. And the voice. It is just a look-alike. Diane, he said, dismissing me for the 1,000th time. Stop imagining things. Mason is coming home this weekend. We need to clean out the garage. Focus on that. They didn't connect the dots. Not yet. Their own bias protected me. They couldn't conceive of a world where I was powerful. So they simply refused to see it. To them, I was still the side character. Side characters don't get primetime interviews. But the door had been cracked open. Sarah's comment was there. Other people in Redford were seeing it. The whispers were starting in the grocery store aisles. Is that the Phillips girl I thought she moved away? Back in Riverton. I was oblivious to the conversation in my parents' living room, but I felt the shift in the air. The contracts were getting bigger, and with bigger contracts came bigger scrutiny. A month after the TV appearance, Northlight Strategies received a request for proposal from Arklane Systems. Arklane was defense adjacent. They did logistics for massive government contractors. This wasn't just a grocery store chain. This was the major leagues. Landing Arklane would put my company into a valuation bracket that made me lightheaded. But Arklane came with attention. 2 days after we submitted our proposal, I received an email from a producer at the Deep Ledger. If you work in business, you know the Deep Ledger. It is not a fluff show. It is an investigative journalism program that has destroyed CEOs and toppled stock prices. They don't do puff pieces. They do autopsies on success. Dear Ms. North, we are fascinated by your firm's rapid ascent and your methodology regarding internal risk. We want to profile you for our season opener. We are looking at the angle, the young woman teaching CEOs to fear the truth. We want to follow you for a week. Full access. I stared at the screen. Full access. Cameras in my office. Cameras following me to coffee. Cameras potentially catching a slip-up. Don't do it. Sarah, my VP, said, they dig deep. They will find out where you were born. They will find the name change records. It is public record. Riley, if they dig, they find Phillips. If I say no, I countered, I look like I have something to hide. Arklane relies on transparency. If I decline the Deep Ledger, Arklane might get spooky and pull the contract. If you say yes, you are inviting a private investigator into your life, Marcus added. You are lighting a flare and standing in the middle of a dark field. I stood up and walked to the window of my office. I looked out at the Riverton skyline. I had built this. I had built it from nothing but spite and caffeine. I thought about my father laughing at the phone screen. I didn't know he had done it, but I could feel the phantom sensation of his dismissal. I knew he wouldn't believe it was me until I was undeniable, until I was so big that he couldn't change the channel. I turned back to my team. We take the interview, I said. Riley, Sarah warned. We take it, I repeated. But we control the access. They can film the office. They can film the meetings. But my apartment is off limits. And I want approval on the B-roll. You are playing with fire, Marcus said. I am the fire, I said. Let them come. This is the part of the movie where you are screaming at the screen. You are yelling. Don't open the door. The killer is in the house. Don't invite the cameras. You know that I am making a mistake. You know that hubris is about to smack me in the face. And you are right. I accepted the interview because I wanted to win. I wanted the Arklane contract. I wanted the valuation. I wanted to be untouchable. But I forgot one thing. The Deep Ledger doesn't just air in Riverton. It airs nationally. It airs on Sunday nights. And Sunday night is the only night Frank and Diane Phillips are consistently home, sitting in front of the TV, waiting for the sports recap. I signed the release form. I let the cameras in. I gave them the footage that would end my anonymity forever. And as I signed my name, Riley North in crisp black ink, I had no idea that I was effectively signing an invitation to the family reunion from hell. I was in the middle of reviewing the Arclane Systems proposal when the episode of The Deep Ledger aired. I had a glass of wine in my hand, sitting in my apartment, watching my own face on the television. The production value was sleek, almost predatory. The opening shot was a slow-motion capture of me walking down the glass corridor of the Northlight office, my heels clicking on the polished floor. The voiceover narration was deep and dramatic. She is the woman CEOs call when they are afraid of the dark, but before she was Riley North, a titan of risk management, she was a ghost. She was the shadow in her own home. In Redford, Ohio. That sentence hit the living room like a physical blow. Diane Phillips was holding the remote control. When she heard the words, shadow in her own home, her grip faltered. The remote clattered onto the coffee table. "Frank," she whispered, "that is her." This time, Frank couldn't laugh it off. The camera zoomed in on my eyes. They were the same eyes that had stared at him across the dinner table for 18 years. The same eyes that had looked for him in the stands at the debate tournament. But the nail in the coffin wasn't the TV show. It was the internet. 10 minutes into the broadcast, a notification popped up on my burner phone, the one I kept just to monitor the silence. It wasn't a text. It was a Facebook tag notification that forwarded to my email. A girl named Jessica, who I hadn't spoken to since senior year English, had taken a screenshot of the TV. She had placed it side by side with my yearbook photo. She posted it to the Redford High alumni group. Is it just me? Or is Riley Phillips now a millionaire named Riley North? The math isn't mathing. Guys, where did she go? The comments exploded, and in the Phillips household, the denial finally shattered. They realized, with a sickening lurch, that their daughter hadn't just drifted away or gotten busy. She had erased them. She had become successful, wealthy, and famous, and she had done it by surgically removing them from her biography. The siege began on Monday morning. I walked into the office at 8 o'clock. Callie, my executive assistant, looked pale. "Riley," she said, her voice low, "the switchboard has been lighting up since 6. A woman claiming to be your mother, a man claiming to be your father, a Mason who says he is your brother." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "What did you tell them?" "I followed protocol," Callie said. "I told them Ms. North doesn't take unsolicited personal calls. I asked if they wanted to leave a voicemail." "Did they?" "Yes, 5 of them. Do you want to hear them?" I looked at the blinking red light on the phone console. "No," I said. "Delete them." Callie hesitated. "Riley, the man, he sounded angry. He said he is driving here." "Let him drive," I said, walking into my office and closing the door. It is a free country. I worked through the day, but my focus was fractured. I kept expecting the door to burst open. 2 days passed. The calls continued, but I refused to answer. Then came the email. It arrived in the general info inbox for the company. The subject line was just, "It is Mom. Can we talk?" I opened it. It was long. It was rambling. It was filled with sentences that started with, "We didn't know," and "We miss you." It ended with, "Please, just give us a chance to explain. We are a family." I read it once. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of grief and rage. I moved the cursor to the reply button. Then I stopped. Responding was engaging. Engaging was losing leverage. I closed the tab. On Thursday morning, the physical breach happened. I was in a strategy meeting with Marcus when Callie buzzed in. "Riley, security is on line 1. There is a man in the lobby. He says he is your father. He is shouting." I closed my eyes for a second. He drove 8 hours. He actually drove 8 hours. He never drove 20 minutes to see me get an award, but he drove 8 hours to claim me now that I was on TV. "Tell security to hold him," I said. "Should I call the police?" Callie asked. I looked at Marcus. He was watching me. Concern etched on his face. "No," I said. If we call the police, it becomes a tabloid story. CEO arrests father, the stock price dips, the Arc Lane deal gets shaky. I stood up. I smoothed my blazer. Callie, set up conference room Aurora, the soundproof one. Tell security to escort Mr. and Mrs. Phillips and anyone else with them, up in 5 minutes. You are going to meet them, Marcus asked. I am not meeting them, I said, my voice turning to ice. I am taking a deposition. I walked into conference room Aurora. It was our most intimidating room, floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the harbor, a table made of black marble that looked like a slab of obsidian. The air conditioning was set to 68 degrees. I stood at the head of the table. I didn't sit. I waited. The door opened. They walked in. Frank looked older. His hair was thinner. His shoulders slumped in a windbreaker that looked cheap against the sleek office decor. Diane looked terrified, clutching her purse like a shield. And Mason looked small. The golden boy had gained weight. His varsity jacket was gone, replaced by a polo shirt that was tight around the arms. He had a knee brace on. They stopped when they saw me. I wasn't the girl in the oversized t-shirt doing homework at the kitchen island. I was Riley North. I was wearing a tailored suit. My hair was sharp. My posture was steel. Riley, Diane breathed, taking a step forward, her eyes filled with tears. Oh my God. Riley. She reached out as if to hug me. Stop, I said. I didn't shout. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke with the same flat, authoritative tone I used to fire vendors who breached contract. Sit down, I said, gesturing to the chairs on the opposite side of the vast table. They froze. The command hung in the air. Slowly, confusingly, they obeyed. They sat in the leather chairs, looking like children called to the principal's office. Riley, honey, Frank started, his voice blustering a little, trying to regain control. What is this? You disappear for years. We thought you were dead. We have been worried sick. You didn't think I was dead, I corrected him. You thought I was irrelevant. There is a difference. We didn't know where you were, Diane sobbed. We called. We looked. Did you? I asked. Did you file a police report? Did you hire a private investigator? Or did you just wait for me to call you because you assumed I would eventually need money? Silence. I am not Riley Phillips, I said. In this building, I am Ms. North, and we are going to have this conversation like adults. No tears, no guilt trips, facts. We are your parents. Frank slammed his hand on the table. You can't talk to us like we are employees. I treat my employees with respect, Frank, I said, because they show up. You are not employees. You are uninvited guests. Diane wiped her eyes. We are so proud of you. Riley, we saw the show. We always knew you were smart. We always said you were the independent one. Independent, I repeated the word. That is the word you used. Riley can handle it. Riley is fine. I looked at Mason. He was staring at the floor. Do you remember my graduation, Mason? I asked. He looked up, startled. What? My college graduation, the day you signed your letter of intent. Yeah, he mumbled. I mean, it was a big day. The scouts were there. It was my future. Riley. It was, I agreed. And on that same day, I graduated magna cum laude with a degree I paid for by scrubbing toilets and pouring coffee at 4 a.m, and not one person from this family sat in the stands. We were busy, Frank yelled. It was a conflict. We couldn't be in 2 places at once. You made a choice, I said. You chose the investment you thought would pay off. You bet on the athlete. You shorted the stock on the scholar. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the cold marble. So, tell me, how is the ROI? How is the return on investment, Frank? Did Mason make the pros? The room went deadly silent. I knew the answer. I had done my due diligence. Mason blew out his knee in his sophomore year. He lost the scholarship. He was currently an assistant coach at a high school, making $25,000 a year. Mason flinched. I got hurt, he muttered. I know, I said. And I'm sorry for that. Truly. But that is the risk of a single asset portfolio. You put all your emotional capital into one child, and you let the other one starve. And now that the starved child is the one with the capital, you are here. Frank cleared his throat. He shifted in his chair. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folder. Look, Riley, he said, his voice changing. It became the voice of a businessman trying to salvage a deal. We made mistakes. We admit it. We were hard on you because we knew you were tough. But we are family, and family helps family. He slid the folder across the table. I did some reading on your company, Frank said. You are doing great, but you are in Riverton. It is expensive here. I was thinking, Phillips & Sons is expanding. We could open a Northlight branch in Redford. I have a space. We could partner up. You could come home. We could be a team. I looked at the folder. I didn't open it. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. You want to invest? I asked. We can scrape together some cash, Frank said eagerly. Maybe $50,000 to get the branch started. $50,000. He thought $50,000 was a fortune. He thought $50,000 bought him a seat at my table. I opened my laptop. I connected it to the wall screen with a swipe of my finger. Let me show you something, I said. The screen lit up. It showed the Northlight Strategies PL statement for the last fiscal year. This is our revenue from last year, I said, pointing to a number that had 7 digits. $3.2 million. I clicked to the next slide. This is our current valuation based on the Arklane proposal, conservative estimate, $75 million. Frank's mouth fell open. Diane stopped crying. Mason looked at the screen like he was looking at an alien language. $75 million, Frank whispered. You're $50,000, I said, my voice calm. Wouldn't cover the cost of the furniture in our reception area. It wouldn't cover the retainer for our IP lawyer. I closed the laptop. The screen went black. I don't need your money, Frank, and I certainly don't need a branch in Redford. Why would I expand into a market that specializes in ignoring value? Frank looked defeated. He looked small. The bluster was gone. He realized he wasn't negotiating with his daughter. He was negotiating with a shark, and he was bleeding in the water. So that is it, Diane asked, her voice trembling. You just hate us. You are going to punish us forever because we missed a ceremony. It wasn't just a ceremony, Diane, I said. It was 20 years of being invisible. It was 20 years of watching you pour love into Mason like he was a golden chalice and treating me like a paper cup. I walked to the door. I put my hand on the handle. I don't hate you, I said. Hate requires energy. Hate is an investment. I am simply divesting. I am liquidating a non-performing asset. Riley, please, Mason said. I'm your brother. I looked at him. You were a brother when it was convenient. Mason, when you needed a cheerleader, when you needed someone to do your chores. But where were you when I was working 3 jobs? Where were you when I changed my name? I opened the door. The only thing of value you can bring to my life right now, I said, delivering the final cut, is a lesson. You have taught me exactly what I will never do to any child, any employee, or any person in my orbit. I will never make someone feel small so I can feel big. Now, I said to the security guard standing outside, please escort Mr. and Mrs. Phillips and their son to the exit. Their visitor passes have expired. I walked out of the room without looking back. I heard Diane sobbing. I heard Frank sputtering, but I kept walking. My heels clicked on the glass floor. A steady, rhythmic sound of a woman who had finally, completely, walked away. But as I turned the corner into my private office, my hands started to shake, not from fear, from the adrenaline of finally, after a lifetime of silence, screaming with my success. I sat down at my desk. I looked at the city of Riverton below me. It wasn't over. I knew it wasn't over. Frank Phillips was a man who didn't like losing. He would be back, but next time, he wouldn't come with a folder. He would come with a fight, and I was ready. I thought the boardroom meeting was the period at the end of the sentence. I thought that by showing them the numbers, by revealing the sheer scale of the gulf between their $50,000 and my $75 million, I had effectively ended the negotiation. I thought shame would drive them back to Ohio. I was wrong. Shame does not drive people like Frank and Diane Phillips. Desperation does. And when desperation is mixed with a sudden, violent realization that they have lost a lottery ticket they didn't even know they were holding, it becomes a campaign. It started with the flowers. On Tuesday morning, the reception desk at Northlight Strategies looked like a funeral home. There were 3 massive arrangements of white lilies. They were expensive, probably $200 a pop, which meant my father was putting this on a credit card he likely couldn't pay off. The card attached to the largest vase read, in the florist's generic handwriting, "Oh, Mom and Dad." It was generic. It was hollow. It was the kind of gesture people make when they have read a book on how to win someone back but skip the chapter on genuine apology. "What do you want me to do with them?" Callie asked, looking at the pollen staining her desk. "Call the pediatric ward at Riverton General," I said, not breaking stride as I walked to my office. "Tell them we have a donation for the nurses' station. Do not include the card." The next day, it was Mason. I was sitting in a strategy session for the ArcLane account when my personal phone buzzed. It was an Instagram notification. I had blocked my parents, but I hadn't blocked Mason. I suppose a part of me still remembered the little boy who used to ask me to check under his bed for monsters. It was a direct message. No text. Just a video file. I shouldn't have opened it. I knew I shouldn't have opened it, but I tapped the screen. It was a grainy clip from an old camcorder. Digitized. We were in the backyard in Redford. I must have been 10. Mason was 7. I was pitching a wiffle ball to him. He missed. I ran over, adjusted his grip, and kissed him on the top of his head. He laughed. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated sibling love. Below the video, he had typed 2 words, "Miss you." My throat tightened. For a second, just a split second, the armor cracked. I remembered the smell of the grass. I remembered that I used to love him before I realized that his success required my erasure. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. But then I remembered the graduation. I remembered the boxes in my room. I remembered him sitting in the boardroom 2 days ago, complicit in the ambush. I didn't reply. I couldn't reply. To reply was to invite the monster back under the bed. I put the phone face down and turned back to the revenue projections. On Thursday, the escalation turned medical. Callie buzzed my intercom at 10 in the morning. Her voice was tight. "Riley, I have a call on the emergency line. It is your mother. She is crying. She says she is being prepped for heart surgery, and she needs to speak to you before she goes under." My blood ran cold. Heart surgery. Diane had high blood pressure. I knew that. Had the stress of the trip triggered something, was I killing my mother by holding a grudge? "Connect me," I said, my hand hovering over the receiver. But then, the training kicked in. The training Nora had drilled into me. Verify the data. Never act on emotion. "Wait," I said. "Callie, hold the line. Which hospital is she calling from?" She said, "Riverton General." "Call the main switchboard at Riverton General on the other line," I ordered. "Ask for patient Diane Phillips. Ask if there is a scheduled cardiac surgery." Callie nodded. I watched her type. I watched her pick up the second handset. I waited for 2 minutes. It felt like 2 hours. Callie looked up. Her face was hard. "There is no patient named Diane Phillips admitted," she said, "and there are no cardiac surgeries scheduled for today." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It wasn't a medical emergency. It was a hostage negotiation tactic. "Tell her," I said, my voice trembling with rage, "that Northlight Strategies does not respond to fraudulent distress calls, and hang up." But the final straw, the moment that forced me to draw the line in the sand, happened at my home. I lived in a secure building now. It was a fortress of glass and steel with a doorman named Henry who used to be a Marine. I paid $4,000 a month for the privilege of knowing that nobody could get to my front door without permission. On Friday night, I came home late. Henry was standing at the desk, looking uncomfortable. "Ms. North," he said. "There was a gentleman here earlier. Said he was your father, Frank Phillips." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "He tried to get a key," Henry said. "He told me he was next of kin. He said he was worried about your mental state and needed to do a wellness check. He was very insistent. He tried to follow a delivery guy into the elevator." "Did he get up?" "No, ma'am," Henry said, squaring his shoulders. "I physically blocked him. I told him that without written authorization from the leaseholder, he was trespassing. He made a scene. He yelled that he had a right to see his daughter. I had to threaten to call the precinct." I stood in the lobby of my beautiful, expensive building, and I felt dirty. I felt like the smell of Redford, that mix of stale beer and disappointment, was seeping into the marble floors. They weren't just calling, they were hunting. They were trying to break down the physical doors I had built to keep myself safe. I went upstairs and called Nora. "They are escalating," I said, pouring a glass of whiskey with a shaking hand. "Frank tried to break into my apartment." "It is an extinction burst," Nora said calmly, "like a toddler screaming louder when they realize the tantrum isn't working, or a client realizing you are actually going to fire them." "I feel like I'm drowning," I admitted. "Every time the phone rings, I flinch. I am CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, and I am hiding in my apartment like a scared teenager." "Then stop hiding," Nora said. "You are treating them like parents. Riley, you are waiting for them to realize they are hurting you and stop. They won't. To them, this is love. This is fighting for family. You have to treat them like what they are, a liability, a toxic client. What do you do with a client who harasses your staff and tries to breach security?" "I set strict boundaries," I said. "And then I terminate the contract." "Exactly," Nora said. "You never said no to them, Riley. You just disappeared. You ghosted them, and ghosting leaves room for interpretation. It leaves room for hope. You need to kill the hope." She was right. I had run away. I had changed my name. I had hidden. But I had never looked Diane Phillips in the eye and said, "This is where it ends." I texted my mother. I didn't use the company email. I used my personal number, unblocking her for exactly 10 seconds to send the location. "Meet me at the Riverline Cafe. Tomorrow, 10 in the morning. Come alone. If Frank or Mason is there, I leave immediately." The Riverline Cafe was public. It was neutral ground. It was near the water. Away from my office. Away from my apartment. It was a place where I could walk away if I needed to. I arrived at 9:55. I didn't wear a suit. I wore jeans and a cashmere sweater. I didn't want to look like the CEO. I wanted to look like the daughter. Just for a moment. So she would understand that she was losing both. Diane was already there. She was sitting at a corner table, clutching a cup of tea. She looked tired. The aggression from the boardroom was gone, replaced by a frantic, weepy fragility. When I sat down, she reached for my hand. I kept my hands wrapped around my coffee cup. "Riley," she said, her voice cracking. "Thank you. Thank you for coming. I am here to finish the conversation. Mom," I said. "And then I am going." "Don't say that," she pleaded. "Please, we can fix this. Your father. He is just desperate. He loves you so much. He feels like he failed you." "He did fail me," I said. "But that is not the point anymore." "He is sick, Riley," she whispered, leaning in. "The stress. It is killing him. His heart isn't good. And the business is in trouble. The market in Redford is drying up. We are drowning in debt." There it was, the pivot, from love to guilt to money in 3 sentences. "And Mason," she continued, crying freely now, "he is so depressed. He lost his identity when he stopped playing ball. He needs a win. Riley, he needs a direction. If you could just help him, give him a job, or just invest in the company so we can pay off the loans. We could be a family again. We could all be together." She looked at me with pleading eyes. She was selling me a fantasy. She was telling me that for the low price of a few $100,000, I could buy the childhood I never had. I could buy their love. I could buy my way onto the mantelpiece. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. It would be so easy to write a check. I had the money. I could fix their lives with a signature. But then I looked at her hands. They were the same hands that had texted me, "You can handle it," while I was standing in line for my diploma. "Mom," I said gently, "listen to me." "I am listening," she sniffled. "If Dad is sick, truly sick, I will set up a direct payment account with the hospital. I will pay for his treatment, every cent, but the money goes to the doctors, not to him." Her eyes widened. "But the business?" "If Mason needs direction," I continued, ignoring her interruption, "I will pay for a career counselor. I will pay for trade school. I will pay for therapy, but I will not give him a job at Northlight. He is not qualified." "He is your brother," she hissed. "He is smart." "He is not an analyst," I said. "And I don't hire based on blood. I hire based on merit." I took a sip of my coffee. "I will help you survive," I said. "Because I am not cruel, but I will not give you cash, and I will not give you access to my life. I will not come to Sunday dinner. I will not open a branch in Redford. I will not be your retirement plan." Diane stared at me. The tears stopped. Her face hardened. The mask of the grieving mother slipped, revealing the cold calculator underneath. "So that is it," she said bitterly. "You offer charity like we are beggars. You are asking for money you didn't earn," I said. "Call it what you want. Family helps family." She raised her voice, drawing stares from the other tables. "When the money runs out, Riley, the business associates won't be there. The magazines won't care about you. When the money runs out, family is the only thing that is there. It was the oldest lie in the book, the lie they tell you to keep you in line." I set my cup down. The ceramic made a sharp clink against the saucer. "Mom," I said, "when I had nothing, when I had negative $14 in my bank account, when I was eating ramen 3 times a day and working night shifts until my feet bled, when I had no money, where was the family?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "You weren't there," I said. "You were at a baseball game. You were buying cleats. You were telling me to handle it." I reached into my bag. I pulled out a thick white envelope. "This is not a check," I said, sliding it across the table. She looked at it with fear. "What is it?" "It is a copy of a restraining order," I said. "My lawyer filed it this morning. It is a no-contact order." Diane recoiled as if the envelope was radioactive. "You are suing us," she gasped. "No," I said. "I am drawing a boundary. This order says that Frank cannot come within 500 feet of my office or my home. It says you cannot call my employees. It says that if you fake a medical emergency to get my attention again, I will press charges for harassment." I stood up. "This isn't a threat. Mom, it is a contract. It is the new terms of our relationship. If you need medical help, you call my lawyer. If you need Mason to see a career coach, you call my lawyer, but you do not call me." Diane stared at the envelope. She looked small. She looked defeated. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt clean. "Riley," she whispered, "don't do this. You are killing us." "No," I said, picking up my bag. "Riley Phillips died in a parking lot 5 years ago. You are just finally attending the funeral." I turned and walked out of the cafe. I walked out into the cool river air. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I didn't look back to see if she took the envelope. It didn't matter. The delivery was made. The boundary was set. Sometimes, a revenge story isn't about screaming matches or dramatic public humiliations. Sometimes, revenge is just a quiet piece of paper that says, "You stop here." I got into my car. I checked my phone. There were 3 missed calls from Frank. I blocked the number. Then I blocked Mason. Then I blocked Diane. I started the engine. "Okay," I said to the empty car. "It is done." But as I drove back toward the city, toward the skyscraper that bore my chosen name, I knew that the hardest part wasn't over. The hardest part was going to be the silence. The silence I had asked for. The silence I had fought for. Now, I had to live in it. It has been exactly 1 year since I slid that white envelope across the table at the Riverline Cafe. 1 year of silence. 1 year of my phone not ringing with guilt trips. 1 year of peace. In that year, Northlight Strategies didn't just grow, it exploded. We opened offices in Chicago and New York. I appeared on 3 more magazine covers. But the most ironic twist of fate arrived in an email from the Board of Regents at Redford State University. They wanted to hire Northlight to design a leadership curriculum. They wanted my name attached to their business school. And in a twist that felt like the universe had a dark sense of humor, I learned from my background check team that my brother, Mason, was currently working there. He was an assistant coach for the baseball team, earning $28,000 a year, his dreams of the big leagues having ended with a popped ligament and a whimper. I took the meeting. "We want to establish the Riley North Leadership Fund," the dean told me, smiling over a plate of expensive pastries. "A full-ride scholarship for promising athletes." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "No," I said. "No athletes." The dean looked confused. "But sports are the heart of Redford." "Exactly," I said. "And that heart is beating just fine without my money. I will fund the scholarship, Dean. In fact, I will endow it with $2 million, but I name it, and I set the criteria. I named it the Invisible No More Fund. The criteria were strict. The recipient must be a first-generation college student. They must be working at least 20 hours a week while enrolled. They must have a grade point average above 3.5. And they must write an essay on a time they felt unseen. The dean agreed. He would have agreed to anything for $2 million. But I had one final condition. "I want to launch it at this year's graduation," I said, "and I want to be the commencement speaker." "Done," the dean said. He didn't know. Nobody in Redford knew that the woman signing the check was the same girl who had sat in the parking lot of that very stadium 5 years ago, crying into a steering wheel. The news of the endowment hit the local papers. "Billion-dollar consultant returns to Midwest to help students." My parents saw it. I know they did. They saw the name Northlight. They saw the date. They saw the location. And because hope is a dangerous, stubborn weed, they decided to come. They didn't buy tickets, they couldn't. The event was sold out. They used Mason's staff pass to sneak into the standing room section at the back of the family zone. I arrived at the stadium in a black town car. The air was thick and humid, just like it was 5 years ago. But this time, I wasn't wearing a polyester gown that trapped the heat. I was wearing a custom silk dress under my ceremonial robes. I wasn't walking in a line of anxious students. I was walking with the security detail. I walked onto the stage. The applause was polite. I sat in the VIP chair, looking out at the sea of caps and gowns. I saw the families in the stands, the signs, the air horns, and then I saw them. It is amazing how the eye can find what it fears, even in a crowd of 5,000. Frank and Diane were standing near the tunnel entrance, squeezed behind a railing. Diane was wearing her Sunday best. Frank was wearing a tie. They looked anxious. They were craning their necks, trying to catch my eye, trying to wave. They were waiting for the family reunion moment. They thought that if they just showed up, if they just smiled hard enough, the past 5 years would dissolve. The dean introduced me. "Please welcome the CEO of Northlight Strategies, Ms. Riley North." I walked to the podium. I adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the students. I saw the exhausted ones, the ones with dark circles under their eyes, the ones who weren't texting their parents because they knew their parents were working a double shift to pay for the gas to get here. "Thank you," I said. My voice echoed across the stadium. 5 years ago, almost to the day, a girl sat in that section right there. I pointed to Section C, row 12. The crowd went quiet. "She had a 3.9 GPA, I continued. She had worked 3 jobs to pay her tuition. She had just been accepted into a top-tier finance program, and on the morning of her graduation, she received a text message." I paused. I saw Diane freeze. I saw Frank's hand drop from where he had been waving. The text said, "We are going to your brother's game instead. Graduation is boring. You can handle it." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Students turned to look at each other. Parents in the stands murmured. "That girl," I said, my voice steady, "sat in her chair for 2 hours. She walked across this stage. She took her diploma, and not one person clapped for her. She walked out to the parking lot, sat in her car, and she realized something terrifying. She realized that her family didn't forget her. They chose to ignore her." I looked directly at the tunnel entrance. I looked directly at Frank and Diane. "She thought she needed them to be valuable," I said. "She thought she needed their applause to be real, but as she sat there, she realized that the only thing she actually needed was for them not to show up, because their absence gave her permission. It gave her permission to let the good daughter die. It gave her permission to change her name. It gave her permission to vanish and reappear as someone they could never hurt again." The camera on the Jumbotron panned across the crowd. It caught the reaction of the audience: tears, shock, nods of understanding. Then, for a brief second, it swept past the tunnel. It caught Diane. She had her hand over her mouth. She was sobbing, her body shaking. Frank was staring at his shoes, his face a mask of red shame. Mason, standing a few feet away in his coaching gear, looked like he had been punched in the stomach. He was staring at me with wide eyes, finally understanding the weight of the trophy he had carried all those years. They couldn't rush the stage. They couldn't scream. They were paralyzed by the narrative I had just built. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was a symbol. If they interrupted me now, they wouldn't be concerned parents. They would be the villains of the story. "That girl is standing here today," I said. "And she is telling you this. If you are sitting there right now, looking for a face in the crowd that didn't show up, stop looking. Look at me instead." I took a breath. "I am announcing the launch of the Invisible No More Fund. This scholarship is for the students who worked the night shift, the students who paid their own way. Each recipient will get a full ride for their masters, a living stipend, and one-on-one mentorship from my team." I leaned into the mic. "And it comes with a promise. We will show up. We will be at your graduation. We will be at your first job interview. We will never, ever let you feel invisible in your own life again." The stadium erupted. It wasn't polite applause this time. It was a roar. Students were standing on their chairs. Caps were thrown into the air. It was a wave of sound that washed away the silence of 5 years ago. I walked off the stage. The reception was held on the lawn behind the admin building. I was surrounded by students, shaking hands, taking photos, and then I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around. It was Frank. He looked older up close. His eyes were bloodshot. Diane was right behind him, clutching a tissue. Mason hung back, leaning against a tree, unable to look at me. "Riley Phillips," Frank said. His voice was hoarse. He sounded small. He sounded like a man who had lost his keys and didn't know where to look. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. "Ms. North," I corrected him gently. "Riley," he tried again. "That speech, that was hard to hear." "The truth usually is." "Frank," I said. "We are here," he said, spreading his arms. "We came. We saw the announcement in the paper. We wanted to surprise you. Doesn't that count for something? We are here now. You are here because I am the keynote speaker," I said. "You are here because I am famous. You are here because you want to be part of the victory lap. But you missed the race." "I am your father," he whispered. "No," I said. "You are Frank Phillips. You are a man who lives in Redford, and I am a woman who lives in Riverton, and we have nothing to say to each other that hasn't been said by a lawyer." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a glossy brochure for the scholarship fund. "If you know any students who qualify kids who are working hard and being ignored by the people who should love them, have them email this address. I will make sure they get help." I handed him the brochure. He took it with a shaking hand. "About the family," I said, my voice final. We ended that in Riverton. Please respect the boundary, or I will have security escort you off the campus. And Mason works here. Frank, you don't want him to lose his job because you caused a scene with a major donor. Frank looked at Mason. He realized the leverage I held. He realized I could snap my fingers and end his son's career. Diane stepped forward. She looked broken. I just want to hug you. She wept. Please, just one hug. I am your mother. I looked at her. I felt a pang of pity, but it was distant, like looking at a stranger crying at a bus stop. That mother, I said softly, didn't stand here 5 years ago. She didn't hug the girl in the parking lot. And I can't hug you, Diane, because my arms are reserved for the people who were actually there. I turned away from them. I saw a young girl standing nearby, clutching a scholarship certificate. She was crying. She was wearing a waitress uniform under her gown. Hey, I said to the girl, opening my arms. Come here. The girl rushed into my arms. I held her tight. I felt her shaking. I see you, I whispered into her hair. I see you, and I am so proud of you. I heard Frank and Diane walk away. I heard the crunch of their footsteps on the gravel. I didn't look back. That evening, I hosted a dinner for the first 10 recipients of the fund. We rented out a private room at a local restaurant. There were no parents invited, just us. We sat around a large table filled with food. My dad didn't come today, a boy named Marcus said, picking at his napkin. He said he had to work, but I know he was just sleeping off a hangover. My mom said a finance degree is a waste of money, a girl named Sarah added. She wanted me to work at the salon with her. I looked at them. I saw the pain in their eyes, the confusion, the feeling that they were somehow defective because the people who made them didn't get them. Listen to me, I said, raising my glass. I know it hurts. It will hurt for a long time. But tonight, you need to understand something. You have a new family now. You have a network. You have me. I looked at each of them. From now on, I said, when you have a win, you call us. When you have a loss, you call us. You have an adult in your corner who will show up on time. Every time. You are not doing this alone anymore. We clinked glasses. The sound was bright and clear. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I walked back to the stadium alone. The lights were off. The stands were empty. The wind was blowing a few discarded programs across the grass. I walked to the spot on the field where I had stood 5 years ago. I looked up at the dark sky. I felt light. The anger was gone. The grief was gone. All that was left was a quiet, humming sense of purpose. I looked at the new sign erected near the scoreboard, the invisible No More Fund. My name was in small print at the bottom, exactly how I wanted it. Riley Phillips, I whispered to the empty air. You died in that parking lot. It was a lonely death, but you saved me. I took a deep breath of the cool night air. And today, I said, you came back to life in 10 new people. You did good, kid. You did good. I turned around and walked toward the exit. I didn't look back at the empty seats. I walked toward the car that would take me to the airport, back to my company, back to my life, back to the empire built by a ghost. This wasn't just revenge. This was resurrection. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but I hope it reminds you that you are the author of your own life. No matter who tries to write you out of the script. Where are you watching from today? I would love to know where my story is being heard. Please tell me your city in the comments below, and let's share our thoughts on what it means to choose your own family. Don't forget to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories. Hit the like button, and smash that hype button so this story can reach more people who need to hear it. I see you. I really do.